Who is Hades? Why does he rule the underworld? And why have we forgotten so much about him? Welcome to my channel. It's time to discover Hades, the forgotten myths of the Greek god of death. We usually associate death with endings, but actually it's just another beginning in disguise. A door that closes somewhere else opens up. In this case, it's the realm of Hades. But what's Hades like? And who rules over it? Well, let's dive into the myths and find out. First off, if you're talking about gods, then Greek mythology wins the popularity contest hands down. I mean, even people who don't believe in gods know about Zeus or Poseidon. But when it comes to Hades, things get kind of fuzzy. We might be familiar with the name, but how well do we know his story? Truth be told, not that well. He doesn't pop up in many myths. So the big question is, why are we so in the dark about our boy Hades? Well, there are a couple of theories floating around. First off, Hades wasn't exactly a social butterfly. He kept a pretty low profile, ruling his underground kingdom and staying out of the limelight. And then there's this whole darkness thing. You see, back in the ancient Greek days, they didn't really talk about death and the afterlife all that much. It was kind of a taboo subject. They had some ideas, but they were a bit hazy and a little scary. So maybe that's why Hades didn't show up in many myths. People were a bit afraid to dig too deep into his realm. Now, let's fast forward to the Roman era. That's when things took an interesting turn. The Romans had their own version of Hades, and they called him Pluto. Now, Pluto was a lot more popular than Hades, probably because the Romans loved their opulence, and Pluto was associated with wealth and the riches you could find in the ground. But here's the kicker. As Pluto's popularity grew, Hades got left behind even more. So by the Middle Ages, Hades was pretty much a nobody. He faded into the background, becoming a god of death and nothing more. But here's the silver lining. When people started digging into Greek mythology again during the Renaissance, they found poor old Hades stuck in the corner with his old image of being the god of death. That's when writers and artists started giving him a makeover. They started adding horns to his helmet and turning him into this horned skeleton dude. And that's the image that's stuck around until today. So now that we know a bit about Hades' history, let's get back to the good stuff. Here's myths. There are a few myths that stand out when it comes to Hades, but one of the most famous has to be his abduction of Poseidon. This myth plays a huge role in the whole story of seasons and explains why winter is so gloomy. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful goddess named Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, who was the goddess of the harvest. Now, Persephone was a free spirit, and she loved to roam around the earth, enjoying all the flowers and plants. One day, while she was picking some flowers with her friends, the ground started shaking, and a giant hole opened up beneath them. Out popped Hades, the god of the underworld, who had been sent by his father, Zeus, to take Persephone as his wife. To make a long story short, Hades snatched Persephone and brought her down to the underworld without asking her dad first. Can you imagine the outrage? Persephone was obviously pretty upset about the whole situation. She cried and cried, which made her mother, Demeter, super sad. Demeter was so distraught that she turned the earth into a barren wasteland. Crops withered, and people couldn't grow food. Zeus saw that things were getting out of hand and decided to step in. He made a deal with Hades. He told him to spit out Persephone and to let her go back to her mum. But Hades had already swallowed a magical pomegranate seed, which bound Persephone to him forever. And let me tell you, Hades wasn't about to let her go. So Zeus had to call a family meeting with all the gods to figure out a solution. After some serious negotiations, they finally came up with a compromise. Persephone would spend 1/3 of every year in the underworld with her husband, Hades, and the other 2/3 of the year with her mother, Demeter, on Earth. And that's where we got the seasons from. When Demeter is with Persephone, she brings warmth and life to the earth, which gives us spring, summer, and autumn. But when Persephone goes back to the underworld, Demeter gets so sad that she makes winter last for 3 months. Now, there's another version of the myth where Persephone is a bit more of a firecracker. According to Hesiod, she didn't exactly jump for joy when Hades popped out of the ground. In fact, she was totally grossed out by him. But Hades wasn't taking no for an answer. He forced himself on Persephone and did the dirty work right there in the hole. And you guessed it, she got pregnant and gave birth to Zeus. But don't worry, she didn't raise him alone. Hades stepped up and became a super dad, taking care of his son while Persephone went back to live with her mom. And speaking of mums, Demeter was none too happy about this arrangement. But Zeus once again swooped in and made a deal with Hades. This time, he gave Hades control of the underworld and made him king of the dead. In exchange, Hades had to give up his claim to Persephone. So these two lovebirds were finally able to be together without any parental drama. And let's just say things got real steamy in the underworld. In fact, it was said that the entire month of February was dedicated to celebrating their wedding. Another myth that has Hades written all over it is the story of Orpheus. If you don't know who Orpheus was, let me catch you up. He was a legendary musician, poet, and prophet, and he was so good at playing his lyre that the gods themselves came to watch him perform. One day, Orpheus decided to take his music down to the underworld, probably to cheer up the place a bit. He figured that Hades, being the ruler of the underworld and all, might appreciate a good tune or two. So he started playing his lyre and singing songs that made the dead come alive. The problem was that Orpheus got a little too comfortable down there. He was having such a great time making the ghosts tap their feet and snap their fingers that he forgot about his trusty companion, Eurydice. Sadly, she took a little detour and got bitten by a venomous snake. Before Orpheus knew it, she was a goner. So Orpheus was like, "Oh snap, I gotta bring her back." So he hit Hades up and asked him to resurrect Eurydice, but Hades was having none of it. He was like, "Sorry man, death is final. You can't just undo it like that. Plus, I've got a whole kingdom to run. I don't have time for this." Orpheus was totally bummed out, but he wasn't about to give up. He decided to sweeten the deal and offered to give Hades half of everything he owned, including all the gifts the gods had given him, just to bring Eurydice back. But Hades was still not budging. He told Orpheus that if he really wanted to bring Eurydice back, he should show him that he's not afraid of the underworld. He challenged Orpheus to walk backwards out of hell without looking back, and if he could do that, he'd bring Eurydice back in a heartbeat. So Orpheus was like, "Bet." He started walking away from the gates of hell, but he couldn't help himself. He turned around to make sure Eurydice was following him, and bam! Just like that, Hades was like, "Bust a move, kiddo, you lost." And sadly, he never went back. Some say Orpheus was so heartbroken that he gave up on life, while others say he just got plain old tired of playing his stupid lyre and wandering around the earth. Either way, he disappeared from human sight, and we haven't heard from him since. Now, some people might think that Hades was a bit of a jerk in these stories, but let's be real, he was just doing his job. The whole point of his realm was to keep the dead from messing with the living. Sure, he could have been a bit nicer about it, but hey, what can you do? So those are just a few of the many myths about Hades, the forgotten god of death. He might not be as popular as Zeus or Poseidon, but he's definitely got a place in our hearts and minds. Because, let's face it, death is a part of life, and we can't understand one without the other. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the underworld. Until next time, remember, even in the darkest of places, there's always a light waiting to be found.